My name is Jason Porter, and I didn't believe in ghosts. I never did. When my wife, Linda, and I bought our first home, I was thrilled. It was an old Victorian house with a lot of character tall windows, a grand staircase, and a charming attic that was just waiting to be turned into a storage space. But from the moment we moved in, I began to feel watched. It started innocently enough. A door left slightly ajar when we were sure we had closed it, a light flickering in the hallway when the house was otherwise quiet. I chalked it up to settling old houses make noises, right? One afternoon, while I was cleaning out the attic, I found something strange. There was a photograph wedged between the floorboards. It was black and white, old and faded, showing a family standing in front of the house. They looked happy enough, but there was something unsettling about the way they were positioned. The family stood in front of the door, but the door was slightly open, revealing something beyond the frame. A figure, barely visible, standing just inside the house. I couldn't tell who or what it was, but I had a strange feeling in my gut. I showed the photograph to Linda, and her face drained of color. She asked where I found it. When I told her it was in the attic, she seemed unsettled. "I think we should leave it alone," she said, her voice low. "We don't need to be poking around in the past." But it was too late. I couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph was trying to tell me something. The figure in the doorway haunted me, its presence like a cold breath against my neck. The following night, I woke up to the sound of someone walking upstairs. At first, I assumed it was Linda, but when I checked the bed, she was fast asleep beside me. My heart started to race as the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate. Coming from the attic, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up to the attic. As I opened the door, the air felt thick, heavy. The room was pitch black, except for the beam of light from my flashlight. Then, I saw it. The photograph, which I had left on the workbench earlier, was now on the floor. It was facing up, but the figure in the photograph, the one I couldn't make out before, was now clear dot. It was a man. He was staring directly at me. His eyes were hollow, empty, but there was something else about his face. Something I couldn't describe. A twisted smile, a look of recognition. I backed away, stumbling over the scattered boxes in the attic. My pulse was racing. When I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. I pounded on the door, screaming for Linda, but there was no answer. The flashlight flickered, then went out. In the darkness, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they were coming closer. I was not alone in the attic. The last thing I remember, before I blacked out, was a whisper in my ear. "Welcome home." When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the attic, the door wide open. I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know how much time had passed. Linda was standing over me, looking terrified. "You were gone for hours," she said, her voice shaky. "We need to leave, Jason. I don't think we should be here." But it was too late. The house knew us now, and no matter how far I ran, the photograph would always be waiting. My name is Sarah Green, my husband Tom, and I had always dreamed of owning an old house in the countryside. And when we finally found one, it felt like a dream come true. The house was beautiful, an early 1900s farmhouse with ivy climbing, the stone walls, and a large grassy yard that stretched for miles. But from the first day we moved in, I had a strange feeling about the place. It was small things at first: footsteps when no one was there, the faint sound of a door creaking open at night, but I brushed it off. After all, it was an old house, and old houses make strange noises. Then, we discovered the room. It wasn't on any of the floor plans we had been given. One evening, while Tom and I were unpacking, I found a door I had never seen before. It was at the far end of the upstairs hallway, tucked away behind an old wooden wardrobe. I hadn't noticed it during the walkthrough, and neither had Tom. "Hey, Tom, did you know there's a door here?" He walked over, frowning. I didn't. We definitely didn't see this when we toured the house. We tried to open it, but the door was locked. It wasn't like any other door in the house. The wood was smooth, untouched by time, and the handle was covered in dust as if it hadn't been touched in years. I didn't think much of it at first. We'd just moved in, and maybe the previous owners had simply hidden it away. That night, I couldn't sleep. The door was on my mind, and I kept hearing the faintest sound, like scratching, coming from the other side. I woke up Tom and asked him if he'd heard it, but he just muttered something about needing more sleep. The next morning, I went back to the door, determined to figure it out. To my surprise, it was slightly ajar. My heart raced. I pushed it open, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. The room was wrong. It was tiny, barely big enough for a single bed, but the walls were lined with mirrors, floor to ceiling, in every direction. There was no furniture, no windows, just mirrors. I stepped inside. The reflections weren't right. They were warped, twisted. My face stared back at me, but my eyes were hollow. My mouth stretched unnaturally wide, like I was screaming. I backed out of the room, heart pounding in my chest. But when I turned to close the door, it wasn't the same room anymore. The mirrors were gone. The walls were bare. The door led to a dark, empty space. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. I looked at Tom, who had followed me upstairs. "Did you see that?" I asked, breathless. He stared at me, confused. "What are you talking about?" "There's nothing there." The door was gone. We left the house the very next day. I don't know where it went or what happened to it, but I know this: no matter how many times I drive past that place, I can never go back. The house isn't there anymore, and I know, deep down, that it's not supposed to be. My name is Emily Foster, and when my husband and I moved into our new home, we were both excited. It was a charming house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, perfect for starting our life together. The house had character old wood floors, a creaky staircase, and a lovely fireplace that seemed to be a centerpiece of the living room. But there was one thing I couldn't shake off: the whispers. It started subtly, just faint murmurs, like people talking in the next room. At first I thought it was just the house settling. The old beams and walls were bound to make noises. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder. One night, as I lay in bed, I could swear I heard someone calling my name, "Emily." I froze. It wasn't Tom's voice. It was soft, hushed, almost pleading. I called out to him, but he was fast asleep beside me. I got up, convinced I had imagined it. But the next night, it happened again. I woke to the unmistakable sound of whispering, coming from the walls. It was like hundreds of voices, all layered over one another, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. The words felt urgent, frantic. "Emily." This time, I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound, which seemed to come from behind the living room wall. I ran my hand along the cracks in the drywall, feeling the vibrations. My heart raced as the whispers grew louder, pressing in on me. The house had always seemed too perfect, too pristine. But now, I realized that there was something off about it, something I couldn't explain. I told Tom the next morning. He laughed it off, saying I was just imagining things, that the old pipes were probably acting up. But as the days passed, I couldn't ignore the increasing intensity of the whispers. They were always there, lingering just beneath the surface, calling my name. Then, one afternoon, I decided to dig deeper. I pulled up the floorboards in the living room. Beneath them, I found something unexpected: an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. It was the journal of the house's original owner, a woman named Margaret, who had lived here decades ago. As I read through the journal, I learned that Margaret had been obsessed with the house's whispers. She had written about hearing them, two voices speaking to her from within the walls. At first, she thought it was just the sound of the house settling. But over time, The voices became more insistent. She wrote that they told her things. Horrible things. They told her that the house had been built on cursed land, and that the spirits who once lived here were still trapped inside. Margaret's journal ended abruptly. The last entry simply read, "They want me to join them." That night, the whispers were louder than ever. Emily, I couldn't take it anymore. The house was no longer a home. It was a prison. A place where something dark and ancient had taken root. I packed our bags, convinced that we had to leave. The moment we stepped outside, the whisper stopped. I don't know where Margaret went after she disappeared, but I do know one thing. The house still stands, and I'm certain it's waiting for someone else to hear the whispers, but not me. Never again. My name is Mark Bennett. When my wife, Claire, and I moved into our new home, we felt like we had finally made it. The house was perfect, spacious, quiet, tucked away in a peaceful neighborhood. But then we started seeing him. It began on our third night. Claire woke me up, shaking my arm. "Mark, there's someone in the backyard." I groggily sat up, rubbing my eyes. She was staring out the window, her face pale. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. A man stood at the edge of our yard, just beyond the tree line. Tall, thin, wearing a suit, his head tilted slightly to the side. Even in the darkness, I could see his grin, wide, unmoving. I rushed downstairs, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the door. But by the time I got outside, he was gone. I told Claire it was probably a prank, maybe a lost neighbor, but that didn't explain why he came back. Every night, always standing in the same spot, always smiling. One evening, I decided to confront him. I stepped outside, heart hammering in my chest. "Hey, what the hell do you want?" He didn't respond. He didn't move. As I got closer, something about him seemed wrong. His limbs were too long, his skin too pale, his grin too wide. Then he took a step forward. I stumbled back. His smile never changed, never wavered. He stepped again, moving unnaturally, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. That was the night we called the police. They searched the yard, found nothing. "We'll patrol the area," the officer assured us. But honestly, sounds like a trick of the light. Maybe a shadow. I didn't believe him. Neither did Claire. The next night, I woke up to a sound, scratching. Not from outside, from inside. Claire was still asleep. My pulse pounded as I crept downstairs. The noise was coming from the living room. I turned the corner and stopped cold. The front door was open, and on the floor, scratched deep into the wood, were 3 words: "Let me in." We left the next morning. The house still stands, empty. But sometimes, when I drive past it at night, I swear I see him standing at the window, still smiling. My name is Daniel Reeves. My wife, Sophie, and I had just moved into our new home, a quiet, old house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was bigger than what we needed, but we planned to start a family soon, so the extra space felt perfect. The first few nights were peaceful. Then we found the attic. The entrance was a small wooden hatch in the ceiling of the hallway. The previous owners had painted over it, almost as if they didn't want anyone to open it. That should have been our first warning. One evening, I grabbed a ladder and pushed the hatch open. A cloud of dust rained down, and the air that seeped from inside was stale, heavy. I climbed up, expecting to find nothing but old boxes and forgotten junk. Instead, in the center of the attic, covered in a thin layer of dust, sat a cradle. It was old, hand-carved from dark wood, with delicate engravings along its edges. But the strangest part, it was gently swaying. There was no breeze. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. Inside the cradle lay a small, tattered blanket, curled up as if it had once held something. I reached out. The moment my fingers brushed the wood, a whisper, low, soft, Woman's voice. Don't wake him. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over a stack of rotting boxes. My breath came in short gasps. I shined my flashlight around, but the attic was empty. I didn't tell Sophie. I convinced myself I was just tired, imagining things. That night, we woke up to the sound of creaking. A rhythmic, gentle squeaking like something being rocked back and forth. Sophie clutched my arm. Daniel, do you hear that? I did. It was coming from above us. From the attic, I grabbed a flashlight and crept into the hallway, my heart pounding. As I reached the ladder, the sound stopped, silenced. Then a soft giggle. I nearly dropped the flashlight. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched, airy, childlike. I slammed the attic hatch shut, hammering nails into it until I was sure it wouldn't open again. The next morning, we packed our bags and left. A week later, I looked up the house's history. In 1952, a woman had lived there with her infant son. The neighbors often heard her singing lullabies late into the night. Then one day, without warning, she stopped. When the authorities entered the house, they found the cradle in the attic, empty. The woman was never seen again. But some nights, if you stand outside that house and listen closely, you can still hear the cradle rocking. My name is James Holloway. When my Emily and I bought our first home, we were ecstatic. It was a beautiful Victorian house, slightly worn but full of charm. The previous owner had left in a hurry, abandoning several antique furnishings, an enormous floor-length mirror in the upstairs hallway. I hated that mirror from the start. There was something unsettling about it. The frame was a deep mahogany, carved with intricate patterns that twisted like vines. But it was the glass that bothered me most, slightly warped, as if the reflection inside wasn't quite right. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I had just finished brushing my teeth. As I turned off the bathroom light, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror, a shadow. But when I looked directly at it, there was nothing there. I shook it off as exhaustion. Moving had been stressful, and my mind was playing tricks on me, or so I thought. One night, I woke up to find Emily sitting upright in bed, staring toward the hallway. "James," she whispered. "Someone's in the house." My stomach clenched. I reached for the bedside lamp, but before I could turn it on, I heard a faint creaking sound, like footsteps on old wood. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy bookhand, crept toward the hallway. But when I turned the corner, expecting to find an intruder, there was nothing, only the mirror. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't moving. I froze. My own face stared back at me, but it wasn't right. The expression was different. The head tilted at an unnatural angle. The lips curled into a grin I knew I hadn't made. Then, without warning, it stepped forward. Not me. My reflection. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. But in the real world, the mirror was still there, untouched. It was only inside the glass that he moved. I grabbed Emily's hand, and we ran. We left everything behind: our furniture, our clothes, even the house itself. The next morning I got a call from the realtor. "You left in quite a hurry," she said. "Is everything okay?" I told her about the mirror. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, "Mr. Holloway, the house has never had a mirror in the hallway." My name is Oliver Hayes. My wife, Claire, and I had been searching for a house for months before we finally found the perfect one. A charming old Victorian with bay windows, a wraparound porch, and more space than we knew what to do with. It had character, as the realtor put it, and yet, from the very first night, something felt ... off. It started when Claire pointed out something strange on the house's blueprints. "Look at this," she said, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. "This layout shows a room that doesn't exist." I leaned over, following her finger. She was right. There, between the master bedroom and the upstairs bathroom, was a space. That should have been a small extra room. But when we walked upstairs, there was no door, no window, just an uninterrupted stretch of wall. Maybe it was sealed off, I suggested, trying to be logical. Claire frowned. But why? That night, I dreamed of that missing room. In my dream, I was standing in front of the wall, my hands pressed against the peeling wallpaper. A whisper drifted from the other side, soft but urgent. "Help me." I woke with a start, my skin ice-cold. Claire stirred beside me, mumbling in her sleep. I tried to shake off the dream, but the whisper echoed in my head. The next day, curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed a flashlight and knocked along the wall. Hollow. There was definitely a space behind it. A single question burned in my mind. What was inside? By the third night, the house itself seemed to be urging me to find out. At exactly 3 a.m., a loud thud shook the walls. Then another, and another. It was coming from the missing room. Something was inside. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I got my tools and started tearing through the plaster. Claire begged me to stop, but I had to know. With every strike of the hammer, the air grew heavier, colder. Then, as I pried away the last wooden beam, darkness gaped before me. A room, small, stifling, and in the center of it a chair, and on that chair a body, shriveled, dressed in tattered clothes, hands bound, mouth open in a silent scream. Claire screamed, and I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The police came. The body had been there for decades. A woman, long forgotten, locked away to die. But here's the thing. That night, as I lay in bed, the whisper returned. Not from the missing room, from the closet. I'm not the only one. My name is Daniel Brooks. When my wife, Sarah, and I bought our new home, we thought we had found our dream house. It was a spacious 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, nestled at the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. Everything about it seemed perfect except for one thing. The house had an unfinished room. It was located at the end of the second-floor hallway, past the bedrooms. Unlike the rest of the house, which had been renovated, this room was bare, no paint on the walls, no flooring, just exposed wooden beams and a single narrow window that barely let in any light. The realtor explained that the previous owners had planned to turn it into a study, but abruptly moved before they could finish. At first, we paid little attention to it. But strange things started happening almost immediately. The first night, as I lay in bed, I heard something. A soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against wood. It was coming from the unfinished room, thinking it was a draft, or maybe a loose shutter. I got up to check, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, the tapping stopped. The door to the unfinished room stood slightly ajar, though I was sure we had left it closed. I pushed it open and felt a rush of cold air, though there was no vent inside. The room was empty. Over the next few days, things escalated. Doors opened and closed on their own. Sarah swore she saw movement from the corner of her eyeshadows slipping away just as she turned. At night, the tapping continued, always the same rhythm. One afternoon, I decided to inspect the room more thoroughly. I brought a flashlight and ran my hand over the wooden beams, searching for loose panels or hidden spaces. That's when I noticed something. There were deep scratches along the walls, not random marks, deliberate carvings. I stepped closer, tracing them with my fingers. Words, "Let me out." A chill ran down my spine. That night, Sarah and I decided to keep the door locked. If something was trying to get out, we weren't going to let it. But that didn't stop it. At exactly 3:12 a.m., we woke to the sound of hammering, loud, desperate pounding coming from inside the unfinished room. The door rattled violently, as if something was throwing itself against it. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Daniel, it's trying to open the door." I leaped out of bed, heart pounding. As I reached the hallway, the pounding stopped. The house fell silent. The door was still closed, but now, something was different. On the outside of the door, carved deep into the wood, was a single word: out. We left the next morning. Later, I learned that the previous owner had been a carpenter. He had sealed off that room himself, bricking up something inside before he vanished without a trace. The room was never meant to be opened, and now, whatever was in there wasn't trapped anymore. My name is Henry Lawson. When my wife, Julia, and I moved into our new home, we were thrilled. It was an old but sturdy house, built in the 1920s, with a wide front porch and a spacious backyard. The price was too good to be true, but we didn't question it. Not until we found the basement, or rather, the basement door. It was locked at first. We assumed it was just stuck, but when I tried forcing it open, I realized something strange. There was no keyhole, no handle on the inside, just a thick, heavy wooden door with iron reinforcements, as if it had been sealed shut deliberately. That night, I heard noises, soft, shuffling movements, a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from behind the basement door. Probably mice, Julia muttered sleepily, but I wasn't convinced. The next day I tried calling the realtor, but she didn't answer. So I did what any rational person would do. I grabbed my tools and forced the door open. The moment the wood splintered apart, a rush of cold air hit me. It smelled damp, stale. I shined my flashlight inside. The basement was larger than I expected, stretching deep into the earth. But something was wrong. The walls were covered in symbols. Strange looping carvings etched into the stone, circling the entire room, and in the center a chair, old wooden, with leather straps, the kind you'd see in a mental asylum. I stepped forward, heart hammering. That's when I noticed the scratches, long, deep gouges on the arms of the chair, as if someone had been restrained. They're fighting, struggling. Then I heard it, a breath, right behind me. I spun around, expecting to see Julia. There was no one there. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed me. I scrambled for my flashlight, my pulse pounding. Footsteps echoed in the blackness. Not mine. Slow, deliberate, then dash, whispers, double quotes. You shouldn't have opened it. My throat tightened. The air grew thick, suffocating. I clawed at the door, forcing it open, stumbling into the hallway. Julia found me shaking on the floor. We left that night. Later, I learned the truth. The previous owner had been a doctor, one who specialized in unorthodox treatments. Patients were locked in that basement. Some were never seen again, and now, whatever had been left behind was free. My name is Ethan Carter. I never believed in ghosts or haunted houses till we moved into the house on Willow Street. From the outside, it looked perfect. A two-story colonial-style home with a large front porch, a spacious backyard, and enough room for my wife, Lily, and our daughter, Emma, to finally settle down. The price was suspiciously low, but the real estate agent assured us the owners were just in a hurry to sell. Our first night was uneventful. The second night, however, was when everything changed. It started with the whispers. I was unpacking boxers in the living room when I heard its soft murmurs, like someone was standing just behind me, speaking under their breath. I turned, expecting to see Lily, but the room was empty. The whispering stopped. Shrugging it off as my imagination, I went upstairs to check on Emma. She was asleep, but the moment I stepped into her room, the baby monitor crackled with static. Then, in a voice that wasn't hers, I heard a single word: leave. A chill ran down my spine. The following days only got worse. Shadows moved where there was no light. The air felt thick, suffocating. One night, as I lay in bed, I woke to the feeling of someone or something standing over me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence. Then came the dreams. Every night, I saw flashes of a woman in a long, tattered dress, her face obscured, standing at the foot of our bed. She never moved, never spoke, just watched. When I finally jolted awake, my body felt like it had been crushed under an unseen weight. Lily started experiencing things too. Objects moved on their own. The kitchen faucet turned on by itself. The house felt ... wrong. One evening, while searching the attic for more unpacked boxes, I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden in the rafters was an old wooden box filled with photographs, black and white images of a family from decades ago. The father, the mother, and their young daughter. But in every single photo, the mother's face was scratched out. I flipped one of the photos over. Written in smeared ink were the words, "She won't let us go." That night, Emma woke up screaming. When we rushed into her room, she was pointing at the corner, eyes wide with terror. "The lady," she sobbed, "she's watching us." That was the final straw. We packed our bags and left that same night. We never returned, never looked back. Days later, I did some research on the house. The previous owners had left abruptly, just like us. Before them, another family had moved out under mysterious circumstances. And before that, a tragic event had taken place. A mother, driven mad, had drowned her own daughter in the bathtub before vanishing without a trace. Her body was never found, but I knew exactly where she was. Still there, still watching, waiting for the next family to move in.